I'm Judge Jessica Harper, 35, standing in the marble ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel in Washington, D.C., watching my family celebrate my younger sister Victoria's engagement to Senator Morrison's son. My mother's voice carries across the room as she tells yet another dignitary, "Victoria's marrying so well. At least one of our daughters understands her worth." Poor Jessica, still filing papers at that courthouse. Some people just never amount to anything. Never amount to anything. That's been their refrain for 13 years. The worthless daughter who dropped out of Yale Law to become a courthouse clerk. The one with no ambition, no prospects, no value beyond organizing files and fetching coffee. The family embarrassment who chose the lowest rung of the legal ladder while her siblings climbed to prestigious heights. What they don't know is that I've spent those 13 years as one of the most influential judges in America. That while they mock my clerk job, I've been writing opinions that have changed constitutional law. That the courthouse where they think I file papers? I'm the youngest person ever appointed to preside over it as a federal judge, and my rulings have reached the Supreme Court 7 times, winning each appeal. In approximately 20 minutes, when Supreme Court Justice Amelia Chin arrives to toast the happy couple, my carefully maintained fiction is going to detonate like a bomb in the middle of high society. Because Justice Chin doesn't just know my work, she's been mentoring me for 5 years, and last month, she did something that would make my family's heads explode if they knew. She recommended me for the next Supreme Court vacancy. Before I share how 13 years of deliberate invisibility is about to shatter in front of Washington's most powerful people, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been called worthless while reshaping your entire field? Have you let your family believe you're nobody while you're actually somebody who matters? Drop a comment below, and please subscribe if you want to hear more stories about hidden giants who let their work speak louder than their relatives. Growing up in Washington, D.C. as the middle child of the Harper political dynasty meant living under the weight of generations of public service, or rather, public performance. My father, William Harper III, was a 3-term congressman who cared more about photo ops than policy. My mother, Catherine, was a lobbyist who measured success in dinner invitations and name drops. Power, in the Harper household, wasn't about service, it was about visibility, connections, and climbing ladders others could see. My older brother, William IV, or Four as everyone called him, understood the assignment perfectly. Harvard undergrad, Yale Law, straight into a white shoe firm where he specialized in helping corporations avoid taxes. By 30, he was a partner. By 35, he was planning his own run for Congress. The Harper legacy continued. My younger sister Victoria chose a different but equally visible path. Georgetown, then journalism, then marrying up, first to a pharmaceutical executive, then after that divorce, landing the senator's son. She called it strategic positioning. I called it what it was, but kept my opinions to myself. Then there was me. The weird middle child who actually cared about justice, not just the appearance of it. Who read Supreme Court opinions for fun at age 12. Who spent high school volunteering at legal aid clinics instead of networking at country clubs. Who saw law as a tool for fairness, not just a pathway to power. Jessica thinks too much about right and wrong, I overheard my mother tell her friends when I was 16. Not enough about winning and losing. That's not how Washington works. She's too idealistic, my father would add. Wants to help people instead of building influence. Where's the power in helping people who can't help you back? The breaking point came during my second year at Yale Law. I was excelling academically but growing increasingly disillusioned with the culture, the presumption that we were all there to join firms, make millions, and perpetuate systems that benefited people like us at the expense of everyone else. You're not here to change the world, Professor Thornton told me after I challenged case law that protected corporate interests over individual rights. You're here to learn how the world works. What if how it works is wrong? I asked. Then you work within the system to gain power first, change it second. What if the process of gaining power within the system corrupts you before you can change anything? He stared at me like I'd spoken in tongues. Then you're in the wrong place, Miss Harper. He was right. I was in the wrong place. But I knew exactly where the right place was. I quietly applied for a federal judicial clerkship, not the prestigious Supreme Court clerkships my classmates fought over, but a position with Judge Marcus Thompson in the D.C. District Court. Judge Thompson was a legend among those who actually cared about justice. Appointed by Carter, he'd spent 40 years writing opinions that protected civil rights, challenged government overreach, and consistently sided with David over Goliath. "Why would you want to clerk for me?" he asked during my interview. "I'm not a stepping stone to anywhere prestigious. No Supreme Court clerk bonuses, no fast track to partnership. Just a lot of hard work on cases that matter to people who don't matter to your world." "That's exactly why I want to clerk for you," I said. He hired me on the spot. The conversation with my parents went worse than expected. A district court clerkship? My mother's voice could have shattered crystal. "Do you know what Victoria just told us? Madison Clark, you remember, Senator Clark's daughter, just got a Supreme Court clerkship. And you're settling for, what? Some nobody judge nobody's heard of?" "Judge Thompson is hardly nobody, he's nobody who matters," my father interrupted. "No connections, no influence, no pathway to real power." "What are you thinking, Jessica?" "I'm thinking I want to learn from someone who uses law to help people, not just to help himself." "Help people?" My mother laughed bitterly. "Help yourself first. That's how the world works." "Then maybe I don't want to work in your world." The silence that followed was deafening. Then my father spoke, each word careful and cutting. "If you take this position, you're making a choice. A choice to be nobody. And Harpers aren't nobodies." "Then maybe I'm not a Harper," I said quietly. "Maybe you're not," he agreed. I started the clerkship the next week. Officially, I was still enrolled at Yale. My parents couldn't bear the shame of a dropout. But I never went back. The work with Judge Thompson was everything law school wasn't: real cases, real people, real impact. We worked on voting rights, criminal justice reform, environmental protection, the unglamorous cases that actually mattered. "You write like someone twice your age," Judge Thompson told me after reading my first draft opinion. "Where did you learn to think like this?" "By watching people who don't," I admitted. He laughed. "Your family?" "My family thinks law is about winning." "You taught me it's about justice." "They're not the same thing." "No," he agreed. "They're not. And people who understand that are rarer than they should be." For 2 years, I clerked for Judge Thompson, learning more about law and justice than 3 years at Yale could have taught me. But more than that, I learned about strategy, how to write opinions that would survive appeal, how to build precedent brick by brick, how to create change that lasted. Then Judge Thompson did something that changed my life. He recommended me for a federal judgeship. "You're 24, I protested. "No one becomes a federal judge at 24. "No one who thinks like you usually gets the chance," he corrected. "But there's an opening, and I've been talking to people. The president wants to appoint judges who actually believe in justice, not just power." "You're exactly what they're looking for." "My family will. Doesn't matter what your family will do. What matters is what you'll do with this opportunity." The confirmation process was deliberately quiet. My age was a liability, but my work with Judge Thompson spoke for itself. The Senate Judiciary Committee was impressed by my writing, my reasoning, my ability to see beyond partisan politics to fundamental fairness. When asked about my youth, I simply said, "Justice doesn't have an age requirement." I was confirmed by a vote of 67 to 33, making me the youngest federal judge in American history. But I swore Judge Thompson to secrecy about spreading the news. My family hadn't attended the hearings. I'd told them I was still clerking, just with more responsibilities. They believed it because they wanted to believe it. A Harper as a clerk was embarrassing enough. A Harper as a judge at 24 would have raised questions they didn't want answered. "Still filing papers?" my mother would ask during rare phone calls. Something like that, I'd reply. "Well, at least you're employed. Though you should see Victoria's new apartment, her fiancé bought it for her. Some of us understand how to leverage relationships. Leverage relationships. I thought of the relationships I was building, with other judges, with lawyers who fought for the underdog, with communities affected by my rulings. But those weren't the kind of relationships my mother valued. For 13 years, I maintained the fiction. By day, I presided over some of the most important cases in the federal system. By night, I was Jessica the clerk, the family disappointment who'd squandered her potential for an invisible job at an unimportant courthouse. My rulings began making waves in legal circles. Harper v. State became required reading in law schools for its redefinition of digital privacy rights. Citizens United v. Harper set new precedents for campaign finance reform. My opinion in Rodriguez v. Federal Government restructured how immigration courts operated, saving thousands from unjust deportation. But I published them all as J. Harper, and my family never connected the dots. Why would they? They never read legal opinions. They read society pages and political blogs, tracking who had power, not who used it. You should see Ford's new office, my mother gushed during one family dinner I couldn't avoid. Corner suite, view of the Capitol. That's success you can see. I thought of my chambers, modest but filled with case law that was reshaping America. Success you couldn't see, unless you knew where to look. The hardest part was watching injustices I could have fixed if they'd known to come to me. When my father's friend faced discrimination charges, I could have advised him, if they'd known I was a judge. When my mother's charity faced a constitutional challenge, I could have helped, if they'd believed I was more than a clerk. But helping them would have meant revealing myself, and revealing myself would have meant becoming what they wanted, a Harper who used position for personal gain rather than public good. So I stayed silent, stayed hidden, and kept writing opinions that mattered to everyone except the people who'd raised me. The invitation to Victoria's engagement party came with explicit instructions: dress appropriately. The Morrison family has standards. Try to blend in and please don't mention your little courthouse job to important people. Blend in. At a party full of people whose cases might end up in my courtroom. The irony was almost too much. I chose a simple black dress, appropriate for a clerk who knew her place. No indication that I'd just been named to the shortlist for the next Supreme Court vacancy. No hint that Justice Chen had been mentoring me for years. No sign that little courthouse job had reshaped American jurisprudence. The St. Regis Ballroom was everything my family valued: opulent, exclusive, filled with people who mattered in the narrow way my parents defined mattering. I recognized half the faces from cases I'd presided over: defendants, plaintiffs, lawyers who'd argued before me. None recognized me out of robes, out of context, out of the story my family told about their worthless daughter. Jessica. Victoria floated over in a cloud of designer perfume and condescension. You made it. I was worried you might have to work. Do clerks work weekends? Sometimes, I said mildly. Well, try to mingle. Maybe you'll meet someone who can offer you a real job. I told Charles, that's my fiancé, about your situation. He says they might need filing help at his father's office. Filing help? At the office of a senator whose legislation I'd struck down as unconstitutional 6 months ago. That's thoughtful. What's family for? We have to look out for those who can't look out for themselves. She drifted away, leaving me to navigate a room full of people I judged in more ways than one. There was Congressman Walsh, whose redistricting plan I'd ruled illegal. Martha Pemberton, whose corporation I'd fined $50 million for environmental violations. Robert Sterling, whose custody case had set new precedents for fathers' rights. All of them, dismissing me as the Harper failure while their fates had been in my hands. Still clerking? Uncle Richard asked, my father's brother who'd never met a conversation he couldn't condescend to. You know, there's no shame in admitting you're not cut out for bigger things. Some people are meant to be support staff. I support justice, I said carefully. He laughed. Justice doesn't pay the bills, Jessica. Success does. Look at your siblings, Four's about to make partner at the most prestigious firm in the city. Victoria's marrying into the Morrison dynasty. And you're, what? Filing motions? Writing them, actually. Same difference. The point is, you're 35. At some point, you need to accept your station in life. My station. I thought of my chambers, of the Constitution on my wall, of the oath I'd taken to uphold justice for all. That was my station, even if he couldn't see it. The evening progressed with similar interactions. Family friends who pitied me. Relatives who used me as a cautionary tale. Parents who couldn't hide their disappointment that 1/3 of their children had amounted to nothing. Such a shame about Jessica, I overheard my mother telling Senator Morrison's wife. She had such potential. Yale Law, you know. But some people just can't handle pressure. Now she does clerical work. We don't talk about it much. Clerical work. I'd clerked for 2 years. I'd been a judge for 13. But in their minds, I was frozen in their disappointment, unchangeable and unchanging. I was contemplating escape when the announcement came that changed everything. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our special guest, the Honorable Justice Amelia Chin of the United States Supreme Court. My blood froze. Justice Chen hadn't mentioned she was coming. More importantly, Justice Chen had no idea I'd been hiding my identity from my family. To her, I was Judge Harper, her protégé and potential successor. She had no reason to protect a secret she didn't know existed. Justice Chen entered with the gravity that came from 30 years of shaping American law. Her eyes swept the room with the same analytical precision she brought to oral arguments. When they found me, her face lit up with genuine warmth. No. 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 She made a beeline toward me, and I saw my carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. Judge Harper. She called out, loud enough for half the room to hear. What a delightful surprise. The room seemed to freeze. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. My mother's champagne glass halted halfway to her lips. Judge? My father's voice cut through the silence. I think you're mistaken. This is Jessica. She's a clerk. Justice Chen looked confused. A clerk? Judge Harper hasn't been a clerk for 13 years. She turned to me. Is this some kind of joke? I stood slowly, feeling the weight of every stare. No joke, Justice Chen. Just a long story. Judge Harper? My mother's voice was faint. You're a judge? She's not just any judge, Justice Chen said, clearly oblivious to the family dynamics she was unraveling. Jessica Harper is the youngest federal judge in American history. Appointed at 24, confirmed by a bipartisan majority. Her opinions have revolutionized constitutional law. That's impossible, For said, finding his voice. Jessica works at a courthouse. She files papers. She's one of the most brilliant legal minds of her generation, Justice Chen finished. I've been mentoring her for 5 years. Her opinion in Harper v. State is taught in every law school in America. Rodriguez v. Federal Government saved thousands of lives. Citizens United v. Harper is being considered by the Supreme Court right now, and will likely become the law of the land. J. Harper, Uncle Richard said faintly. The J. Harper whose rulings are always in the news. That's you? Yes, I said simply. But why? My mother seemed to be having trouble forming words. Why would you hide this? Why let us think? Think I was worthless? I supplied. Because you'd already decided I was. When I chose a district court clerkship over a Supreme Court one, you said I was choosing to be nobody. When I wanted to help people instead of building power, you said I was wasting my potential. It became easier to be the disappointment you expected than fight for recognition you wouldn't give. This is insane, Victoria said. You're telling me my sister, who I just offered filing help to, is a federal judge? That she's been a judge this whole time? Not just a judge, Justice Chen said, still not grasping the situation. She's on the shortlist for the next Supreme Court vacancy. At 35, she could become the youngest Supreme Court justice in history. The silence that followed was deafening. Supreme Court? My father whispered. Possibly. If nominated and confirmed. I looked at him steadily. Would that be enough power for you, Dad? Or would you find a way to diminish that too? Judge Harper has redefined privacy rights in the digital age, Justice Chin continued, warming to her subject. Her work on voting rights has protected millions. Her criminal justice opinions have reformed entire systems. She's done more for American justice in 13 years than most do in lifetime appointments. While we called her worthless, my mother said, sinking into a chair. While you called me worthless, I agreed. Every family dinner where you praised Ford's corporate victories, I was writing opinions that protected workers from corporations like his. Every time you celebrated Victoria's strategic marriages, I was protecting women's rights in divorce proceedings. Every time you said I'd amounted to nothing, I was reshaping American law. Your father, Justice Chin said, recognizing him suddenly. Congressman Harper. Your daughter struck down your redistricting plan. I remember thinking the opinion was brilliant, fearless in its commitment to fairness over politics. My father's face went through several colors. You ruled against me? I ruled against gerrymandering. You happened to be the one doing it. But I'm your father. Which is exactly why I had to rule against you. Justice can't play favorites. This is why you hid, First said slowly. You knew we'd expect you to use your position for the family. For our benefit. Yes. And I couldn't. Wouldn't. So I let you think I had no position to use. Judge Harper, someone called out. I turned to see Robert Sterling approaching. I didn't recognize you out of robes. You presided over my custody case. You gave me joint custody when 3 other judges wouldn't even consider it. You saved my relationship with my children. You did what the law required, I said simply. Fairness. Nothing more. It was everything, he insisted, then looked at my family. Your daughter is a hero to fathers across America. Her rulings have revolutionized family law. More people began approaching, recognizing me now that the secret was out. Each had a story, a case where my ruling had mattered, a precedent I'd set that had changed lives. My family stood frozen, watching their worthless daughter revealed as anything but. The environmental case, Martha Pemberton said quietly. You fined my company $50 million. Yes, I said, meeting her eyes steadily. It was the right call. We were destroying communities. Your ruling forced us to change. Saved lives. Cost me a fortune, but saved lives. She turned to my parents. Your daughter chose justice over wealth. Do you have any idea how rare that is? We're learning, my mother whispered. Senator Morrison himself approached, and I saw him recognize me. His face went pale. You're the judge who struck down my immigration bill. It was unconstitutional, I said simply. Yes, he agreed reluctantly. It was. Your opinion was thorough. Impossible to appeal. That was the point. He stared at me, then at Victoria. Your sister is marrying my son. This could be complicated. Only if you keep writing unconstitutional legislation, I said mildly. Justice Chen, finally understanding the dynamics, intervened. Perhaps we should give the family some space to process this. But the damage, or revelation, was complete. The room buzzed with the news. The Harper daughter they dismissed as worthless was one of the most powerful judges in America. The clerk they'd pitted was reshaping law. The nobody was very much somebody. I found myself on the terrace, needing air. My family followed, clustering around me with the shell-shocked expressions of people whose world had fundamentally shifted. 13 years, my mother said. 13 years of lying to us. 13 years of letting you believe what you wanted to believe. There's a difference. We could have been proud of the wrong things. You would have been proud that I had power, not that I used it justly. You would have bragged about my position while pressuring me to rule in ways that benefited us. You would have turned my service into your status symbol. That's not fair, For protested. Isn't it? Tell me honestly, if you'd known I was a judge when your firm had that tax evasion case, wouldn't you have asked me to intervene? When Dad's redistricting was challenged, wouldn't you have expected family loyalty? When Victoria's first husband hid assets during their divorce, wouldn't you have wanted inside information? Their silence was answer enough. I became a judge to serve justice, not the Harper family agenda. Hiding let me do that without choosing between my oath and your expectations. So you chose your oath, my father said bitterly. I chose integrity. The fact that you see those as different things is why I had to hide. Victoria was crying. Do you know how many times I called you pathetic? How many friends I told about my loser sister who couldn't hack it in real law? Yes, I said simply. I know. And you just let me? Your cruelty hurt less than your potential corruption would have. That's cold, For said. That's necessary. Do you know how many judges rule based on personal interest rather than law? How many compromise justice for family gain? I refuse to be one of them. By pretending to be nobody, my mother said. By being somebody you couldn't see. There's a difference. Justice Chin reappeared. Judge Harper, I apologize for the disruption, but since the truth is out, several reporters are asking for statements about your potential Supreme Court nomination. Supreme Court, my father repeated, still processing. My daughter might be on the Supreme Court. Your daughter has been reshaping American law for 13 years, Justice Chin corrected. The Supreme Court would be lucky to have her. We need to talk, my mother said. As a family. Privately. After the party, I conceded. Victoria deserves her engagement celebration. How can I celebrate knowing my sister? Victoria stopped. Knowing what we put you through. What I put you through. By being happy. Your engagement has nothing to do with my career. Be happy for your own sake. While you sit there judging us? I judge cases, not people. Well, I amended, professionally speaking. The party resumed, but with a different energy. Word had spread. The worthless Harper daughter was Judge J. Harper. The family disappointment was a legal legend. The clerk was a constitutional scholar whose opinions shaped America. I endured the rest of the evening with as much grace as I could muster. Relatives who'd pitted me now wanted favor. Friends who'd dismissed me now wanted connections. The same people who'd used me as a cautionary tale now wanted to claim credit for my success. I always knew Jessica was special, Aunt Margaret lied transparently. That quiet intelligence. I told everyone she'd surprise us. You told everyone I was wasting my life, I corrected gently. Well, I meant surprise us eventually. It's been 13 years. That's a long eventually. She huffed away, offended by accuracy. For approached during a lull. I looked you up on my phone. Your cases, your opinions. You've ruled against my firm 17 times. Your firm was wrong 17 times. We were representing our clients. I was representing justice. It's a different client. You cost us millions. I saved your opponent's justice. Different currency. He studied me. You really don't care about money, do you? I care about fairness. Money often opposes fairness. Simple math. That's not how the world works, that's how my courtroom works. And my courtroom shapes how the world works, one case at a time. You're powerful, he said, like he was just realizing it. I'm fair. In a world of corruption, fairness is power. And you hid that power. I protected it. From people who would have wanted me to use it unfairly. From family who confused justice with favoritism. From us. Yes. From you. The party finally ended near midnight. My family gathered in a private dining room, the five of us facing truths 13 years in the making. Start from the beginning, my father ordered. Everything. The truth this time. So I told them. The disillusionment with Yale's power brokering culture. The clerkship with Judge Thompson that opened my eyes to real justice. The shocking nomination at 24. The decision to hide rather than face their pressure to corrupt my position. Every case you mentioned at dinner, I was probably presiding over. Every legal victory you bragged about, I might have been ruling on. Every time you called me worthless, I was writing opinions that law students memorize. Why didn't you trust us? My mother asked, tears streaming. Because you told me exactly who you were. Power matters. Connections matter. Winning matters. Justice? That was never on your list. We would have changed, no. You would have pressured me to change. To use my position for Harper gain. To rule for family instead of fairness. To become what you valued, corrupt. That's harsh, Victoria protested. That's honest. Tell me, if you'd known I was a judge during your divorce, what would you have wanted? She was silent. Exactly. You would have wanted inside information, favorable rulings, judicial corruption. And when I refused, you would have called me selfish. Better to be worthless than corrupt. So you chose being alone, my father said. I chose being ethical. Loneliness was the price. A high price. Lower than corruption. I can live with loneliness. I couldn't live with injustice. And now? My mother asked. What happens now that we know? Now I continue being a judge. You continue being yourselves. Maybe with more honesty between us. Will you help us? For asked carefully. Help how? With cases, with connections, with no. The word was flat, final. This is why I hid. You know, for 5 minutes and already you're asking for corruption. Not corruption, just corruption with another name. No. I will never rule for Harper benefit. Never share confidential information. Never use my position for family gain. If that's what you want from me, I'll disappear again. We don't want you to disappear, my mother said quickly. We want to know you. The real you. The real me is a judge who values justice over family. Can you accept that? Can you teach us to? Victoria asked. To value what you value? I've been teaching by example for 13 years. You just weren't watching. We're watching now, my father said quietly. Your mother's right. We want to know you. Not to use you, just to know you. That's a start, I conceded. Will you tell us about your work? Your real work? My mother asked. The parts that aren't confidential. Will you let us attend? When you're sworn into the Supreme Court. If I'm nominated. If I'm confirmed. If you can attend without making it about Harper prestige. We'll try, my father promised. Trying is a start. We talked until dawn, really talked for the first time in 13 years. About justice versus power. About service versus selfishness. About the daughter they'd dismissed who'd quietly become everything they'd never taught her to value. I'm proud of you, my mother said as we prepared to leave. Not for being a judge. For being incorruptible. We didn't teach you that. No. You taught me its opposite. I learned integrity as rebellion. Rebel daughter, my father said with something like wonder. We raised a rebel who rebelled by being ethical. Disappointing, isn't it? I said with a small smile. No, he said firmly. Challenging. But not disappointing. Not anymore. I drove home as the sun rose over D.C., thinking about visibility and value. For 13 years, I'd been invisible to my family because my value didn't register on their scale. Now, visible, I wondered if they could learn new measurements. My phone buzzed with messages. Reporters who'd connected the dots. Colleagues surprised by the revelation. Law students who'd studied my opinions without knowing my story. But the message that mattered came from Victoria. Just read Harper versus State. You protected privacy rights for millions while I called you worthless. I'm so sorry. And so proud. Your sister who's learning to count. Learning to count. Maybe that's all any of us could do, learn to count what matters, even when it takes 13 years to understand the value of what was dismissed. 6 months later, I stood in the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room, hand raised for my Supreme Court confirmation hearing. In the gallery behind me, my family sat together, not claiming credit, not seeking connections, just witnessing. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Please state your name for the record. Jessica Harper. Judge, D.C. District Court for the past 13 years. Judge Harper, you're 35 years old. If confirmed, you'd be the youngest Supreme Court justice in history. What qualifies you for this position? I thought of my family, finally learning to see me. Of 13 years of hidden service. Of justice pursued without witness or praise. Senator, I've spent my career proving that justice doesn't require an audience. That fairness doesn't need applause. That doing right doesn't depend on who's watching. I've written opinions in obscurity that shaped American law. I've served without recognition because service was the point, not recognition. I believe the court needs someone who values justice over visibility, fairness over fame, integrity over influence. My age matters less than my commitment to those principles. You famously hid your position from your own family for over a decade. Can you explain why? I glanced at my parents, who nodded encouragingly. My family valued power over principle. They would have pressured me to use my position for personal gain rather than public good. I chose to protect my integrity by protecting my anonymity. It was a painful choice, but a necessary one. Justice can't play favorites, even with those we love. Do you regret that choice? I regret that it was necessary. I don't regret making it. The hearing continued for hours. Questions about my opinions, my philosophy, my youth. Through it all, I felt my family's presence, not as pressure but as support. They were learning to value what I valued, slowly but genuinely. During a break, my mother approached. You're magnificent, she whispered. Not because you might be on the Supreme Court. Because you're you. Incorruptible, invisible you who we couldn't see. You see me now. We're learning to. Give us time. I've got a lifetime appointment coming. Time I have. The confirmation vote was 78-22. At 35, I became the youngest Supreme Court justice in American history. The swearing-in ceremony was small, private, my choice. But my family was there, watching their worthless daughter take an oath to uphold justice for all. I'm proud of you, my father said afterward. For everything we missed. Everything we dismissed. Everything you did without us. I did it because of you, in a way. Your example taught me what not to become. That's a harsh legacy. That's a useful legacy. Opposition can be education. Then we educated you well, he said with rueful humor. You did. Just not how you intended. Justice Chin found us in the reception. The invisible judge, finally visible. How does it feel? Terrifying, I admitted. Visibility was never my goal. But necessary now. Young women need to see that power doesn't require performance. That service doesn't require spotlight. That worth isn't measured by those who never learned to count. My family's learning to count, I said, watching them navigate the reception without trying to leverage connections. Good teachers help, she said, smiling at me. You've been teaching them for 13 years. They're finally ready students. That night, my family gathered for dinner, not at a power restaurant where they could be seen, but at my modest apartment where we could actually talk. I cooked, something I'd learned during years of solitary dinners, while they sat in my living room, taking in the space where their worthless daughter had lived. It's so normal, Victoria said, looking around at my simple furniture, my walls lined with law books rather than vanity photos. What did you expect? Gold-plated gavels? I don't know. Something that screamed federal judge. This just screams Jessica. Same thing, if you're looking properly. For examined my bookshelf, pulling out volumes with margin notes in my handwriting. You've been studying constitutional law for fun. While I was billing hours, you were reshaping the Constitution. Different hobbies, I said, bringing in plates. Your hobby became history, he said. Mine became wealth. Which matters more? Both matter to different people. The question is which matters to you. We ate dinner like a normal family, if normal families included a Supreme Court justice cooking pasta while explaining constitutional theory to parents who just discovered their daughter existed beyond their assumptions. I've been reading about judicial philosophy, my mother said, surprising me. Trying to understand how you think. You're what they call a pragmatic originalist? You've been doing homework. I've been doing penance. 13 years of calling you worthless requires serious study to atone. I don't need atonement. Just understanding. Then I'm trying to understand. Explain pragmatic originalism to someone who thought law was just about winning? So I did, using simple examples, watching my family actually engage with ideas rather than just influence. My father asked about precedent. Victoria wondered about constitutional interpretation. For questioned the balance between justice and law. They're not always the same, I explained. Law is what's written. Justice is what's right. My job is to bring them as close together as possible. Even when it costs you? My mother asked. Especially then. Easy justice isn't justice, it's convenience. We chose convenience, my father said quietly. Every time we dismissed you, we chose the convenient narrative over the complex truth. Yes. But you're choosing differently now. Because you forced us to. By succeeding where we couldn't see. I succeeded because you couldn't see. Your blindness gave me freedom. That's generous, Victoria said. That's accurate. If you'd known I was a judge at 24, what would you have done? Bragged, she admitted. Pressured, for added. Corrupted, my parents said together. Exactly. Your ignorance was my protection. Not ideal, but effective. And now? My mother asked. Now that we know, now that you're on the Supreme Court, what protection do you have? The same protection I've always had. Integrity. The willingness to be misunderstood rather than compromised. The knowledge that worth isn't determined by those who never learn to count. We're learning, my father said firmly. Late, but learning. That's all I can ask. After they left, I sat in my study, preparing for my first Supreme Court oral arguments. The case involved voting rights, fitting, since I'd spent 13 years protecting the right to be heard while hiding my own voice from those who should have heard it first. My phone rang. Victoria. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. Not because you're on the Supreme Court. Because you're still you. The same person we called worthless, just finally visible. That takes strength I don't have. You have different strengths. No, I have different weaknesses. You turned our family's weaknesses into your strength. That's incredible. That's survival. That's more than survival. That's transformation. We talked for an hour, really talked, sister to sister, without the weight of expectations or disappointments. She told me about her fears that her new marriage was just another strategic move. I told her about the loneliness of ethical stands. We found common ground in the space between who our family wanted us to be and who we actually were. Can I ask you something? She said finally. If you could go back, would you tell us sooner? Trust us to change? I thought carefully. No. You needed those 13 years of calling me worthless to recognize worth when you finally saw it. I needed those 13 years of invisibility to build something worth seeing. We all needed the time, even if it hurt. It did hurt. You. It hurt all of us, just differently. You thought you had a worthless sister. I knew I had a family who couldn't see worth. Which is worse? Both. Neither. I don't know anymore. That's growth, not knowing. Certainty made you cruel. Uncertainty might make you kind. I want to be kind. To you. Finally. Then be kind to others who seem worthless. They might be building revolutions you can't see. Is that judicial advice? That's sisterly advice. The judicial advice costs extra. We laughed, the first real laugh we'd shared in over a decade. My first opinion as a Supreme Court justice dealt with employment discrimination. The case was complex, but the principle was simple: worth isn't determined by visible metrics. The janitor had been fired for not fitting company culture, code for being too poor, too different, too easy to dismiss. I wrote for the majority, crafting an opinion that redefined how companies could evaluate employees. Worth, I argued, couldn't be measured by surface presentations. Value wasn't visible to those who'd never learned to see. This is about you, Fur said when the opinion was published. About us. About how we measured worth. It's about everyone who's been dismissed by those too blind to see value. I just had personal experience to draw from. 13 years of experience. The most expensive education possible. But effective. The opinion became a landmark, cited in thousands of cases. Law schools taught it as Harper versus Visibility, the case that said worth couldn't be determined by those who'd never learned to count. My family attended every public session that first year, watching their formerly worthless daughter reshape American law from the highest bench. They learned to see the careful thought behind each question, the deep care behind each opinion, the revolution hidden in robes. You're changing the world, my mother said after a particularly contentious case about corporate accountability. I'm changing how the world counts worth. Same thing, different angle. We counted wrong. You counted what you were taught to count. Now you're learning new math. Patient teacher, my father observed. I had 13 years to prepare the lesson. Patience was built in. The years passed. Cases came and went. My family slowly transformed from power seekers to something approaching understanding. They stopped trying to leverage my position, started trying to understand my principles. They ceased seeing law as winning and began seeing it as justice. I'm thinking of leaving the firm, for announced at dinner 3 years into my tenure. Starting a legal aid practice. Why? I asked, though I suspected. Because I'd been counting wrong. Billable hours, corporate victories, wealth accumulation. You've shown me there's different math. Justice math. Justice math is harder. Less lucrative. But more valuable? To me. Maybe to you. Only you can decide. He did decide, trading corporate law for public defense. Victoria divorced the senator's son, strategic positioning having proven hollow, and returned to journalism, focusing on exposing corruption rather than enabling it. My parents started a foundation promoting judicial independence, having learned its value through their daughter's example. We're different because of you, my mother said at my 5th anniversary on the court. You're different because you chose to be. I just showed you the choice existed. By hiding it from us for 13 years. By protecting it until you were ready to see it. Everything has its season. Even revelation? Especially revelation. Too early and it's rejected. Too late and it's resented. Just right and it reshapes everything. You reshaped us. You reshaped yourselves. I just held still while you figured out how to see. 10 years into my Supreme Court tenure, I received a letter. Handwritten, careful, from a young woman who'd been following my career. Dear Justice Harper, it read. My family calls me worthless because I want to teach in inner city schools instead of pursuing corporate law. They say I'm wasting my potential on people who don't matter. Your story gives me hope that worth isn't determined by those who never learn to count. Thank you for showing that invisible service matters. Thank you for proving that worthless is just another word for priceless to the wrong audience. I wrote back, telling her what I wished someone had told me at the start, that worth is intrinsic, not assigned. That service doesn't need witnesses. That the smallest classroom can reshape the world if the teacher sees students others dismiss as worthless. My family learned to count, I added. 13 years late, but they learned. Yours might too. But even if they don't, your worth remains. Teach those kids. Change those lives. Let others call it worthless while you build worlds. She wrote back after her first year teaching, 30 kids others gave up on are heading to college. Their worth was invisible until someone counted properly. Thank you for teaching me to count. I framed that letter, hanging it next to my JD from Yale, the degree I'd earned but never valued, next to the impact I'd made by hiding from those who'd valued the wrong things. Different math. Different worth. Finally counted correctly. My 20th year on the Supreme Court coincided with my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. The family gathered to celebrate, not at a power venue but at the small restaurant where they'd had their first date, back when they were idealistic law students who believed in justice. We lost our way, my father said in his toast. We confused power with purpose, influence with integrity. We raised 3 children and only recognized 2 of them. But the one we missed, she found what we'd lost. Justice. Service. Worth beyond wealth. To Jessica, my mother added, who proved that worthless is priceless to those who can't count. Who served in shadows while we celebrated spotlights. Who taught us that the most powerful position is often the least visible. Our daughter, who we failed to see but who saw justice clearly enough for all of us. To different math, for added. To proper counting, Victoria continued. To worth recognized late but valued forever, they finished together. I raised my glass to them, my family who'd learned to count, slowly and imperfectly but genuinely. Who'd transformed from calling me worthless to understanding my worth. Who'd discovered that power without principle is worthless, but principle without power can reshape the world. To second chances, I offered. And to the 13 years of invisibility that made them possible. We love you, my mother said simply. Not the justice. Not the judge. You. The daughter we couldn't see but who saw us clearly enough to protect justice from our corruption. You, who we called worthless but who proved priceless. Just you. That's worth everything, I said. And finally, after 20 years of serving justice and 13 years of hiding it, my worth was counted by the people whose count I'd wanted most, even when their math was wrong, even when their values were skewed, even when worthless was the only word they had for what they couldn't understand. Different paths. Same destination. Finally home in a family that learned to count. That's my story, how 13 years of being called worthless led to the Supreme Court and a revelation that changed how my family counts value. How serving justice in secret protected it from corruption. How worth isn't determined by those who never learned proper math. If you've ever been called worthless while building something priceless, if you've served in shadows while others celebrated spotlights, if you've had to choose between family expectations and personal integrity, I see you. Your worth is real. Your service matters. Your invisibility is not absence but presence too powerful for small minds to perceive. Drop a comment below sharing your own story of being undervalued while creating value. Where are you watching from? What revolutions are you building while others call you worthless? And please, hit that subscribe button if you believe that worth can't be measured by those who never learn to count, that service doesn't need applause, and that sometimes the most powerful position is the one nobody sees coming. Thank you for sharing my journey from worthless daughter to Supreme Court justice. Thank you for understanding that justice sometimes requires invisibility, that integrity often means isolation, and that worth is intrinsic, not assigned. Until next time, keep serving whether seen or not, keep building whether recognized or not, and remember, worthless is just priceless to the wrong audience. Different math. Proper counting. Finally valued. Just 13 years late, but forever changed.